The Afro-Argentines are black immigrants from Africa who were enslaved in Argentina in the 18th century. Their large numbers formed a significant part of the Argentina population, but after a few years, their numbers decreased. In 1778, according to a census carried out by the Spanish Council, it was discovered that the Afro-Argentines were about 37% of Argentina's population. Many years later, they dropped to about 15% of the total population, and now Argentina is currently the whitest country in South America. Due to the limited population of the Afros, it's almost impossible to find them in notable careers such as sports, journalism, politics, and many more. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Afro-Argentines and what led to their reduction and eradication in Argentina. Let's dive right in. Their history. In the 16th century, black people were captured from their homelands in Africa and enslaved with their feet and hands chained. Some were from Cape Verde Islands, while the majority were from ethnic groups speaking Bantu languages, from territories, which comprise Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Republic of Congo. There were a few Yoruba and Iwe. In the 1600s, according to an estimate, 12 million African slaves got to Latin America through slave ships. But while passing through the Atlantic, about 10 to 15% of the captured slaves died, and many more died during the process of enslavement while traveling through the interior part of Africa. There's a record of about 40 deaths for every 100 slaves who successfully reached the New World. Some of these black men were captured and taken to Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina. Their main commercial activity at the time was trading slaves for money. The slaves were forced to work in agriculture, livestock, domestic activities, and crafts. In urban areas, most slaves made handicrafts for sale, while the revenues earned went to their masters' pockets. The Buenos Aires neighborhood of San Telmo and Montserrat had a large number of slaves, although most were later sent to the interior provinces. Due to the profit earned from the business, the slave trade industry became prominent, and about 70% of the trading activities in Buenos Aires involved capturing and importing slaves from Africa. Soon, it became a legalized trade in the country. In 1778, a census conducted by Juan José Salcedo of Vartes showed that there was a large number of blacks in regions where there were a lot of agricultural products. The percentage of blacks was about 50% of the total population, and this number continued to increase because of the continuous importation of slaves. In 1813, the slave trade business came to an end, but slavery itself continued until it was abolished in 1853. The Afro-Argentine culture in Argentina has a rich and complex history that dates back to the era of the Atlantic slave trade. While the country has a relatively small Afro-Argentine population today, estimated at around 1 to 2%, their cultural contributions have been significant and have helped shape the country's identity. Afro-Argentine culture is an essential part of Argentina's diverse cultural heritage. Buenos Aires, which was once the center of the slave trading business, is currently admired for its clothing architecture and structural beauty. Denial of rights. From the colonial period till the 19th century, the Afro-Argentines were considered property rather than human beings and had no legal rights. Even after slavery was abolished in 1853, Afro-Argentines faced segregation and discrimination in many areas of life. They were often excluded from schools, churches, and other public institutions and were forced to live in separate neighborhoods. Afro-Argentines were often excluded from well-paying jobs and were forced to work in menial or low-paying occupations. They also faced discrimination in hiring and promotion. They were often excluded from political participation and had little representation in government. They were also denied the right to vote until 1912. Many Afro-Argentines lost their land and property due to discriminatory laws and practices. They were often forced off their land or had their property seized without compensation. Black people couldn't attend universities before the law got abolished in 1853. The white children had a longer number of schooling years than the black children because of racism. The 14 schools in Buenos Aires in 1857 only admitted 2 black children, although 15% of students that year were of color. They had no access to their healthcare centers. All of these resulted in their poor economic and financial status. What led to the decline of the Afro-Argentines population? The Afro-Argentine population began to decline in the late 19th and early 20th centuries due to a combination of various factors. One of the main factors is the abolishment of slavery in Argentina in 1813. This led to a gradual decrease in the number of enslaved Africans and Afro-descendants. Its decrease was a result of an absence of a legal mechanism for importing new African slaves into the country, hence limiting the growth of the Afro-Argentine population. The Afro-Argentines and Argentines War also reduced the black population. A war broke out in 1810, and the Argentines fought for their independence. In 1816, they finally got their independence from Spain. However, the black men who were slaves during the war were forced to fight at the battlefronts. This led to a large death casualty of the black population. They might have assisted in fighting for independence, but the Argentines also used it as a way of reducing the population of blacks in their country. Maria Remedios del Valle was one of the notable slave soldiers who fought during the war, alongside her husband and children. She fought in several battles and was known as Madre de la Patria, meaning Mother of the Nation, for her bravery and dedication to the cause. However, she lost her husband and son in the war and died of poverty in 1847. Another notable slave is Jacinto Ventura de Molina. In 1773, he was born into slavery in Buenos Aires and fought in the Wars of Independence. He was wounded in the Battle of Salta in 1813 and died shortly after from his injuries. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the government made a call for European immigrants, and this caused an increase in the number of white people due to the Europeans who migrated. With more European immigrants in Argentina, the prospects for a whiter country were achieved. Due to interracial marriages, a new mixed race was created, and this kept reducing the black skin color. The European immigrants affected the labor market, with former slaves and their descendants facing increased competition for employment. There was a rise in economic competition, combined with racial prejudice and discrimination. Deteriorating health conditions was another major factor that led to their decrease in population. In 1864 and 1871, the Afro-Argentines lost a higher percentage of their population to cholera and the yellow fever epidemic, respectively. Many Afro-Argentines lived in precarious conditions, with limited access to basic services such as clean water and sanitation. Moreover, they faced discrimination and social exclusion, which limited their access to medical care and other resources that could help them prevent or treat the disease. They often had to rely on traditional medicine and home remedies, which were not always effective in treating the disease. This led to most of their deaths. The whitening cream and interracial marriages. As a result of the loss of black men in the 1810 war and the diseases, black women became the larger part of the Afro-Argentine population. This largely contributed to the rise of interracial marriages in Argentina. There were few black men, so the black women were left with two choices: to get married to an Argentinian man or contest for the few African men who were still alive. Most of the women chose the first option, while some chose the latter. These Afro-Argentines sought interracial marriages to climb up the social ladder because they felt they had no other alternative in the face of discrimination they got. To have a better life and enjoy citizenship rights, they had to opt for an option to make their offspring white. The new generation of people born from interracial marriages were referred to as the non-whites, which was a superficial term that embodied the government's denial of its racial diversity. If Argentina's current population were to be studied, it would be noticed that the non-whites population is higher than both the pure blacks and the whites population. Interracial marriages functioned like a whitening cream. Accompanied by the whitening was a loss in their black identity, not just in genetic makeup and skin color, but in consciousness as well. About 90% of the people in Argentina today, who are identified to be white, is proof that many Argentines are ignorant of their ancestry to the extent that they really can't tell if they are indeed white, or they are descendants of Afro-Argentines. All of these factors contributed to the marginalization and eventual disappearance of the Afro-Argentine community. Today, Afro-Argentines make up a very small percentage of the overall population, estimated to be around 1% or less, and their cultural and historical contributions to Argentina are often overlooked and underrepresented. Afro-Argentines today. The masked ethical demarcation that has assured Argentina's erasure of its black history is astounding. As the lives of Afro-Argentines were lost, the black knowledge and the black accounts also got lost in history. In recent times, due to the effect of the re-emergence of the black community in the 20th century, the Afro-Argentines continually fought to bring back their histories by telling their stories to people. They have also created black associations such as the Grupo Cultural Afro, SOS Racismo, and most importantly, the Africa Viva group, which was innovated by Paca La Madrid. These groups have helped to revitalize people's interest in the African heritage of Argentina. There are also the Afro-Uruguayan and Afro-Brazilian settlers who helped to expand the African culture in Argentina. On 9 October 2006, the Forum of African Descent and Africans in Argentina was created to promote its social and artistic pluralism, a fight against the demarcation of the black population in the country. The National Institute Against Demarcation INADI is the public body that is responsible for combating demarcation and racism. In 2021, the Argentine government created a community, which is known as the Afro-Argentine Community Federal Advisory Council. The community comprises prominent Afro-Argentine activists and scholars. A memorable feat was achieved when November 8 was assigned by the Argentine legislation to celebrate Maria Remedios del Val, the female Afro-Argentine soldier who fought for Argentina during the Argentine War of Independence in the 1800th century. Since 2013, November 8 has officially been pertained to as the public day of the Afro-Argentines, and its African culture has served as a day when Argentina revisits and celebrates its roots. But yet, the question of whether Argentina is truly a white country or not continues to persist. This question does not fit into a black or white structure, but one thing is certain. White Argentina found it quite difficult to completely eradicate the black Argentines in its libraries, which is a good thing, most especially for the Afro-Argentines who had bravely fought for the country's freedom. We have come to the end of this video. What do you think of the Afro